Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. So a while ago, actually I think it was like about a week ago since filming this video, Tarte released the Tarteist Pro Remix palette. Now, this is a palette that is described as a colorful palette with blues, purples, red, orange, yellow, and yeah, I thought it was kind of boring. Okay, of course, like those are my own opinions. Everyone has their own opinions. Personally, I thought that the exterior packaging, the splatter paint job, was so much more fun and interesting than the actual palette within. I do not consider this a very exciting, colorful palette. I barely consider it a colorful palette whatsoever because like it looks to me like it's very neutral, but it has some pops of color, and the only reason it looks relatively exciting is because of the packaging. So I decided to redesign this palette. I decided to basically think in my head and think about what are the ways I can just improve this palette and what are the ways I can make this palette into what I consider a better version of the original palette. So these are my mock-ups. I'm just going to show you my improved version of this palette right here. Of course, everyone has their opinion. This is my ideal version of this palette. So this is it before and then this is after. So you can see I definitely made a number of changes in this mock-up. I'm going to go into my thought process and I'm going to go into detail as to why I changed it the way it was, what I felt this palette is lacking, and how I feel like this palette can be improved on. And I'm also going to take you through all my different picks for the different shades. You can see that I changed pretty much like almost every single shade. I left some shades untouched and I'll tell you why. But anyway, let's just get into this. So I'm just going to pull this image up on my computer. So immediately what I thought that I didn't really like about this palette was the fact that yes, they had so many neutrals and the neutrals in my opinion were boring. For example, you had two very similar mid-tone brown shades which were like apparently shimmery kind of metallic shades, and I didn't like that. I also didn't like the fact that the colors in general looked very muted and the only exciting colors I could see were the deep red, which was a shimmery color, and I feel like, I don't know. I didn't really like that red too much. And then we had that purple, then we had the yellow, which I believe is a metallic, and then we had that green. So those were the only exciting colors that I found in this palette. There were some other colors in this palette that I liked, but those were the colors that stood out to me. And I decided to make a play on that when recreating this palette. And you can see that I actually took out some of the colors and I replaced them with others. So first of all, let's start off with Spin. Now, Spin in general in the original palette was like this very boring mid-tone brown. So for Spin, I actually moved the color Inspiration to the left and I just plopped it into that pan where the mid-tone brown was, because I just felt like that was a little bit, that just made more sense for me. Plus I wanted to eliminate that brown altogether because what I wanted to do was to add a matte blue. And what I did is the next color next to it, I basically put in a sky blue matte. And what I did is I literally took the splatter paint color from the packaging. I color matched a custom color based on the splatter paint and I made it a matte blue. Okay, because I feel like this splatter paint job on the packaging looked so beautiful that I wanted a color, I wanted several colors in the actual palette to reflect this beautiful splatter paint job, and I wanted a light matte blue. So what I did is I basically added a matte blue, and that is Inspiration. The next two colors are the colors that I did leave unchanged. The first color is Art Deco, which looks like it's a very metallic looking light blue. And then we have Artist, which is a deeper version of like a dustier version of a blue. Both of these colors, they're not great, they're not amazing, but I felt like they would work in this palette if we added a little bit of like sky blue to kind of break these colors up. I feel like these colors could work in this palette because I feel like this entire row now is a gradient. You have your highlight shade, which can work for pretty much any kind of look. You have your matte blue, and then you have those last two colors, which are metallics and which can be worn together with that row or separately. And then the last color in that row is called Color Explosion. That's another color I left unchanged. pretty much because I was kind of excited by that color in the original palette and I did not see a need to change it since I really do love an emerald green. Okay, so moving on to the next row. This was a color called Wall Art, and I'm going to show you the original color here, and it's a mid-tone taupe. You know, it's a very mid-tone taupe. I didn't find it inspiring in any particular way, shape, or form. I didn't like it, so what I did is I instead basically pulled inspiration from the palm leaves, or like the green leaves surrounding the palette. I did a little bit of color matching in Photoshop and I pulled a dark green shade, and I'm going to make it a matte because I love a matte dark green. So many people can wear a matte dark green. I feel like even the Tarte customer would be very happy with one because it can really look good on so many different eye colors, on pretty much every single eye color. And what's great about a matte green, especially one as dark as this, is that you can put it on and it doesn't even look like a colorful shade. I feel like for the Tarte customer could put the shade on and it doesn't even look like it's a colorful shade. It's a very subtle way of wearing color. And since the Tarte customer seems to be a very much of a neutral lover, I figured that this would be a shade that is colorful, that can push them a little bit, but it's just enough to keep them in their comfort zone because it's so dark that when you put it on your eyes, it doesn't even look like a very bright green, unless you add some other colors, of course. Then after that, the next color was like this very boring looking taupey gold color, which I guess could work for an inner corner highlight, but for me, it wasn't enough. I wanted to add something else because I just felt like it was yet another neutral that I did not want in this palette. So what I did is I pretty much transformed it into a very icy looking violet color. I love using like colorful shades in my inner corner highlight, and I feel like this color, if it was made into an actual shadow, it would be like this beautiful icy violet color that would work for pretty much any kind of look, and it would just add so much pizzazz to a look. And honestly, it's just so much more interesting, in my opinion, to have this color than to have like the weirdish like yellowish light gold that was there before, because this is a little bit more unique. It's a little bit more fun. Then after that, we have the color DIY. Now DIY was originally an olive shimmery color, a shimmery metallic color. I did not like that, so I decided to change it into a limey, sort of like mid-tone green, okay? And it's a matte. And I, again, took inspiration from the like leaves surrounding the palette. I pulled a mid-tone green, and I love the fact that it is like a green that has just enough yellow in it to make it a little bit more interesting. I love a green color in my eyeshadow, and I just felt like since this palette was apparently nature inspired, that this would be a beautiful shade to include. The next color that I have is ink. I just left it the way it was. I didn't really feel a need to change it. I feel like a matte black, you know, it's an okay color to have in a palette, so I didn't really feel like I needed to change anything. The next color that I have is Beat Drop. Now, Beat Drop essentially was a dark gray metallic. I don't like a dark gray metallic, and it looks like it has like a little bit of glitter in it. I don't really get that. I would never use that. I don't really think a lot of other people would either, so what I did is I just basically transformed it into an electric blue, which I feel like is a lot more fitting for the name Beat Drop than a slate gray. So I definitely feel like that's an improvement. You know, it's a pop of color, it's kind of relative to the green that's above it, and it's just a beautiful color that I feel would work for so many people. And again, what I did is I pulled inspiration from the actual packaging, and I decided to create a very bright, saturated blue. The next color that I have is called Mixed Media, and I don't know if you see the difference, but in the original palette, the color was very light. It's like a very light transition shade, which I don't really like. I feel like a transition shade that light only works for a small range of skin tones. So what I did is I just basically stepped it up a shade darker and I made it a little bit more yellow to make it a little bit more unique. Because I feel like if you're a Tarte customer, you already have this like type of like very basic transition color, because I feel like a lot of the Tarte palettes include a color similar to this. So what I want to do is I want to step it up just a notch and create a shade that could work for like the greens, the green looks that you would create in this palette. It could work for like the yellows, it could work for the blues, and it's just like a more unique version of a transition color than the color that was originally in the palette. Next is a color that I'm so excited about. It's called Splatter. Now, Splatter originally was a very light, kind of weak looking greenish gold color. I did not get this color. I mean, it's a nice color in the pan, but I feel like this kind of color when you put it on your eyes, it's just, it looks so basic. So what I did is I basically made it a light lime metallic. This is a color that I think would look beautiful either as a spotlight eye or as an inner corner highlight. It's kind of similar to Flow, my version of Flow, which is right above it, in the sense that it is such a very bright metallic color, but it has actual color in it. You know, it's not your typical highlight shade, and I feel like I have never encountered a shade like this in a palette, but I do feel like this fits into this entire palette so well, and it looks good, and I really love this color. Then I have the color called Outside the Lines, which was a metallic yellow color, and I did not like this shade. I just wanted a more matte version, so what I did is I just made it matte and I made it a little bit lighter to add a little bit more yellow to it. Then the color next to that is called Mic Drop. What I did is I made it a little bit more orange. I was going to leave it, but then when I was finished with the rest of the palette and I looked at that shade, I was like, that is way too basic for this palette that I created, so I basically made it a touch more orange, added a little bit of red in there, and it's still metallic, it's still a very basic neutral color, but what's great about this version is that I feel like it goes so well with like the greens, and it goes so well with the blues, and it's actually a color that would work well with the colors that I added into the palette. Then another color that I really didn't change is called Graffiti. This is a metallic plum color. It's very basic, but I really did want to keep it in the palette because I felt like it was a good color to have. It's kind of similar to that matte dark green color in the sense that you put it on your eyes and it doesn't really look like a colorful shade, so it's great for those of you guys that love neutrals, but it still is a colorful shade. It's still something a little bit more exciting and fresh, and I felt like it was a good shade to keep in the palette. Then moving on to the last row, I have this color called Graffiti. Now, Graffiti originally was a metallic, like kind of shimmery looking red color. I just didn't particularly like this color, and I actually moved it to the pan next to it. I just didn't really like the finish on this color, so what I did is I basically took a violet light color from the Splatter paint and I added it into the pan, and it basically created this beautiful light pastel matte looking purple color, and I love this color. It's such a pretty color. I feel like it would work for a variety of looks, and I felt like it fit into the theme of the palette, and I just really liked it a lot. And then the color next to it is called Moonlit. This was a very light gold color. I don't know what it is about light golds. I just don't like light golds, and it was a light metallic gold. And I just was like, okay, so this is just yet another color you're gonna put into your inner corner, like, you know, what is that? So what I did is I basically made it a dark red matte. It's kind of like, it's very similar to the color that was Graffiti, but it's a matte version and it's several shades deeper, which I think is a little bit more unique. It's a little bit more interesting, and I just like that a lot better. I'm gonna move on to the color next to this, and this is called Mashup. Now, Mashup is yet another color that I chose to keep in the palette. I just felt like it was a nice color. It was a fun color. It was one of the shades that I was actually quite excited about, so I just decided to leave it. It's a more metallic version of a mid-tone purple, which I did like. Then the color next to it is another color that I decided to pull inspiration from the packaging with. I decided to transform this sort of like very basic light pink color that was kind of a metallic into a matte pink. And I did this by basically color matching the splatter paint from the packaging and putting it into a pan. And I love this matte pink. I feel like it's so much better. I feel like it just adds like some pop to the palette, and I just love that matte pink. And I feel like matte pink right now is very trendy. It's very much something that a lot of people want to wear. And you can put this in your crease using a light hand, or you can build it up if you really want to add that pop. I just felt like it was something in the packaging that I really wanted to reflect in the actual palette. And then last but not least, the last shade is called Create. Now, the original color in the palette that was called Create was basically like a very kind of like, I guess, a duochromy, like greenish, grayish color, and I didn't feel like it was exciting enough for me. So what I did is I basically transformed it into a light kind of like purple color. And I like this color because I feel like it could be a duochrome. I feel like this could be like a purpley slash bluey kind of duochrome, and I just really love the idea of having a purple that is very high impact. So I didn't want to make this a little bit more purple because I just felt like with this palette being so colorful, that light greenish gray color, it just wasn't cutting it for me, so I decided to transform it into a lighter purple. So that is pretty much it for this video. That is my redesign of the Tarteist Pro Remix palette. I just felt like if Tarte was going to do a colorful palette, they might as well make it a little bit more exciting. They might as well make it something that their consumers don't necessarily own, and I feel like this is the type of palette that they could easily use one of their original Tarte palettes with, if that makes any sense. In my mind, the Tarte customer who buys like the whole like original Tarte palettes can really just use their original palettes and use this colorful palette together to create some really beautiful looks. Maybe to add some pops of color, maybe to add some touches of uniqueness into their makeup looks that they hadn't really tried out before. And I also feel like there are enough neutral tones in this palette to satisfy those who do love neutral tones while still making them push their creativity just a little bit. So that's pretty much it. It's gonna get pretty dark soon, and it's actually getting quite dark as we speak, so I'm just gonna go now. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye guys.